Music
along to it.
Well, you can't hear it because it's Blue Jeans.
I can't hear it, but I'm going to pretend to dance along.
Go.
Oh, okay. Hi. I can't hear shit, and I didn't get as much of a signal as normal. So this is episode 27 of High Fantasy, Marvel's Broken Jars podcast network, and we're going to redo an episode that was lost to terrible recording programs and corruption.
Yes, and we're sorry it's been so long.
10.
You know, holidays, Thanksgiving, sickness. I think I called off at least once for being sick, and I'm sick again. So if I get really loopy, it's because of cough meds. Sorry, guys.
Yeah,
Makes for entertaining podcasting, so don't worry.
But it led to us not recording for the entirety of November, and that might have at least helped Colin. So what did you manage to accomplish in November, Colin?
I finished my NaNoWriMo.
Does that mean you actually reached the end of the story, or did you just hit 50,000 words?
50,000. I'm probably about 2/3, 3/4 through.
Jesus
Okay.
Christ,
I intended
man.
it to be around 50,000, 60,000 words when I planned the story, so I'm happy with that. Of course, the story ran away from me entirely, so like all these building blocks I was planning on putting in the early part kind of got dropped when events started happening, and my characters didn't have time to go do the things I wanted them to do.
You do know it's possible to plan a story, right?
Yeah, I had plans.
And make it, like, stick to that plan?
No. That never happens for me.
Okay. So,
I had the
you wrote-
arcs for each section planned, but then the events of the section before kind of superseded the next section, and I just had to keep going with it.
Interesting.
Yes, very interesting.
We can talk about that later, because it's part of the process.
Yeah. So, Jacob, did you get anything done?
I've got some done, not nearly as much as I would have wanted to do since the 6 or 8 weeks we've been off. I actually had a very, very terrible bout of depression I had to fight through with my therapist and my wife and everything else. So, yeah, there wasn't as much writing getting done, but I'm getting back to it. In the last probably 2 weeks, I've done about 5,000 words, so it's pretty good. But for the 6 weeks before that, probably nothing. So,
So, I don't remember when I started working on this story, but a few weeks ago, I got really caught up with the idea of Victorian era London. So, I'm doing something with it,
Like 2
basically.
months
Just
now.
2 months? Okay, I
been a
can't
while.
remember. And well, I started like being able to actually put things down in like the world building section, and now I've gotten to the plotting, which is always where I hit roadblocks and where I get stalled. So that's literally what happened. It's like I started plotting out the opening, and then I hit my first roadblock, and it's like I need to figure this out. And that's
Where I
am
get
now.
random messages through Discord about, Colin, help me!
Yes,
and
that's what I did.
that is a great segue into our podcast topic. The
Yeah.
process of how you write. So, Director Alex, when you get struck by a story or an idea, how do you start building this story idea that might eventually lead into a book?
So for this one, I basically just took all of the aesthetic things that I really like about Victorian era stuff, which is like the architecture, the fashion, just like the general amount of despair that it always seems to have. And like that's the time when like horror stories started popping up, like the Penny Dreadfuls and like the Frankenstein, Dracula. It's like that kind of seems to influence the setting in general.
Well, Dracula was
and I like
funded
it.
by the White Court, so, you know.
Of course. Horror, right?
Is Dresden just real life at this point?
Maybe it is in Broken Jars. I really liked just all of the various aesthetic tastes for it. It's like, how do I force this to be relevant? And I cannibalized another story idea I had from a few years ago, of which I had like a woman just getting released out of an insane asylum, actually.
Oh, that'd be
needing to-
really good in Victoria,
Yeah.
London, yeah.
Right, because Bedlam was a great historical. Actually, it was terrible, but it was Like, it was the insane asylum, and it became so notorious. Bedlam became its own adjective, and I just wanted to deal with that.
So you bring up Bedlam as an adjective. I'm a big Oklahoma State fan. Anytime Oklahoma State and OU get together, it is known throughout the country as Bedlam.
Oh. Well, not known to me. All I knew was the asylum.
Yes, but still.
Because I don't give a shit about football.
Well, it's football, wrestling, whatever, but still, yeah. I mean, Bedlam is near, the term is near and dear to my heart.
I do believe you threatened to push a very big, important Broken Jars meeting because of Bedlam.
I did. No, I didn't threaten to push it. I said I won't meet because of Bedlam.
Alex, have you played Dishonored yet?
No.
You should play it, because it does, like, it's not England, obviously, but it does, like, a phenomenal job of creating this fictional, industrial, Victorian-era kind of city and culture. And
yeah, maybe. And I've mostly, what I've been doing is trying to consume a lot of British television so I can think of British accents, which has been weird. But I'm just trying to, like, find decent Victorian stuff, and I haven't found much. Because, like, okay, the show Penny Dreadful, it was kind of good, but it was rough, and then they just lost it. And it's
probably what you need to do is actually, if you're looking for accents, is watch British sitcoms. Like IT Crowd, where they're not trying to do anything. They're just there and being British. You know? Well,
there's Luther is something I just finished watching. It was very good in the beginning, and then I'm not sure what they're doing with it after. But they're just like, you know, people who grew up there and all their crazy accents. It's like, okay, that person's accent is definitely different than hers, but where are they from and why? Because, like, every town that's 15 minutes away from each other is going to have a different accent.
There was this High Fantasy Reviews TV shows.
Apparently. I don't know. I've been enjoying all of it, and I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm kind of just accepting that, like, I need to figure out this much and not all the rest of it, and I'm just going to try to run with it. Like, I don't know if I'm going to call it England, or if I'm going to make fake England, or whatever. I don't know.
England.
England.
I was going to go with the name Albion because that's like a historical thing. It's also everywhere.
Yeah.
So, Colin, when you get that bite for a new story, what do you do?
It varies. Sometimes I'll just start writing the opening scene, which inevitably does not become the opening scene because that's not a good way to start a story. But other times, like, for me, a lot of times a story comes as either a character or like an idea that's a plot point for later on. So I'll sit back and figure out who's involved in it, and usually the setting kind of comes with the idea to begin with.
Okay,
but I do a lot of writing out.
Actually, I'm gonna have a hard time following both of you. Let's step back. Let's go back to that spark of inspiration. How do stories come to you?
Randomly.
Yeah.
Yes, but
they just pop into my head, and I'll go write down. Like, I carry a notebook on me at all times.
Do you see it as like? How do you see that story? Like, when it pops in your head for the first time, it's like Colin's walking the side, going.
Yeah, sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll be like one of my stories. I was reading, or I was playing Witcher 3 and doing a vampire hunt, and I'm like, I haven't read a good vampire story in a long time. I want to write one. So then I kind of set about creating a vampire story.
I mean, at this point, I feel like I have the skill that I can force the story out of whatever I want it to be, which is kind of nice because I'm not just like a slave to whatever my original idea is. But I usually just run with the original idea, which is usually a character in an uncomfortable situation somewhere in a setting. Okay. And I just take that and I go.
Right.
So
okay.
So my ideas come from what I want to read.
What you want. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, it's like I'm frustrated I can't find the perfect TV show. I'm going to write a book.
Yeah, a lot of times for me, I'm just like, I just think of a really interesting concept. And I'm like, that could be a good book, and then I go from there.
Yeah, I think one of mine was just like, I think you were talking about the Golden Girls story. And I was just thinking of random things along those, like if this story in this setting, and I think I had Lord of the Flies in space, and I'm like, that could be fun.
Oh,
haven't done
great,
much.
great, yeah.
I haven't done much with it, but it's an idea I've started.
Like one of the stories I'm writing, I've been writing for years now. It actually came from, I was watching an episode of Friends, and someone said, we have reservations at 8. And I'm like, that sounds like a really good title for a book. So I started writing a romance novel. And it won't be a novel. If I'm lucky, it'll be 20,000 words, but I'm getting close to the end of it, thankfully.
The story I did for the Sanderson class, where I originally met Alex, I think it was probably Reddit, but it was a sci-fi photo of this farmer, and there's this giant, like, War of the Worlds style alien kind of thing, kind of like leaning over to him, communicating with him. And I'm like, that's a really cool photo. Drawing, picture. But then I wanted to know what was going on there, so I just sort of created the backstory of the photo and went off that. It was a cool picture, and I wanted to know why.
Yeah, I'm noticing a lot of the inspirations are just weird visual stuff.
Yeah, I can see that. Lovecraft must have had some weird dreams.
Yeah.
Well, opium was legal at that point.
Yes, but he didn't even drink alcohol, so I don't know if he would have done opium.
Who's to say?
He wasn't Poe.
That is true. Lovecraft was not Poe.
He didn't get drunk and die in an alley.
So
So-
okay, let's talk about the actual, like, process.
Well, we have an idea, and what do you do to flesh it out? You get, like, the starting spark of it.
Putting pen to paper, so to speak, even though most of us actually don't work with real paper anymore, which is so sad. But
It's just that before you can
Paper
actually
trees.
start writing the story, you need to flesh it out. You need to do whatever outlining you're going to do, which could be nothing. But do you guys have a process of outlining it?
see, I disagree completely with you. Because any
Why?
good story
What?
can be put into any setting.
Sure, sort of. Not unless it's important.
I don't know. I feel like the setting kind of contributes a key factor of how something would develop.
Yes, but so
Like, take Dresden. As much as he made it work in the modern setting, he had to invent an entire thing just to make sure modern technology didn't make Dresden's job irrelevant.
right, but it's like most people know, I've written a space western, and there's so much stuff that doesn't. It still communicates if you're writing it a western or a space western. It's just some of the interconnecting objects change. You know,
That
the
depends.
idea of the gunslinger doesn't change, even though his bullets might be lasers instead of, lead and gunpowder,
Han
that kind of
shot
thing.
first.
Yeah,
I mean, you can do that. You can have a murder mystery anywhere in any setting,
Yeah.
whoever people. That's fine. But if you have the setting be important and be critical, like it's very different to be on an island in the desert stranded and not having enough resources versus being stranded in a spaceship and threatening to die by vacuum.
Thematically, they're similar, but
But yeah, like the way that the story's going to go, what the characters have to do,
Yeah.
those are completely different.
like
They're not.
your plot is going to be determined by the setting
Yeah.
to an extent. But the themes and character challenges are still somewhat close.
right. and
So
that's-
the
that's
setting
what I was
matters as
getting
much
at.
as you make it matter, but it does matter. That made sense,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Right.
If
So-
you want to have a character, if you want to have a stranding situation, you can set it anywhere where a person can be stranded, but how they're going to overcome that challenge is fairly dependent on the setting.
Yeah. Or insert magic system or anything else.
Yeah.
Insert whatever tool they're gonna have to use. That's gonna be important.
Like, picture if Dresden, instead of, having Bob, he had a secret wizard dark web with all the information on it.
It'll be a lot less snark.
Yeah.
You wouldn't need to buy romance novels.
Or let Bob go have orgies at dorms.
Yeah, I mean, it decreases some amount of the flavor. Unless you get, like, 4chan-y type flavor, which could be weird.
I don't know, wizard dark web.
Well, but when you're doing the outline, when you add structure to the original idea that you have, how do you do it? Like, Colin, you usually do the 3-act structure, right?
Oh, absolutely, every time.
Why?
Because it makes sense.
I don't give a shit about it. It's hard for me to think it makes sense. It's like, why try to split up the story by 3 things? I just know the beginning and the end, and I need to find the middle.
Yes, but everyone...
For narrative sense and satisfaction to the reader, it helps to plan that.
Right. And the thing is, with 3-act structures, we're so used to it when something doesn't follow it.
Doesn't feel right.
It doesn't feel right. Even though you as the reader may not know you're not seeing the 3-act structure, like, this just feels off. Like,
I mean, I have a pretty certain everything I've done could be falling into a 3-act structure, and that's fine. It's not like I'm trying to avoid it. I just don't find it a useful thing to try to build off of when creating. I mean, what I need after, like, the starting idea is I need to know the ending I'm getting to. So what I started doing with this Victorian story is I have, like, the opening premise, and I write another paper of just the end result of everything. And so now I need to get those two to have connections between each other and, more tension, more drama, more fun, and things like that.
right. And that's sort of why I fall into it, which makes me wonder if I should start writing the middle first and then create the beginning and the ending. Because the middle, I mean, that's my hardest part.
I can see why.
Like, I can do
hard.
30,000 here and 30,000 here, but nothing in the middle.
What frustrates me with the middle is I always feel like I'm writing to avoid reaching the conclusion at this point.
That's possible. I mean, obviously you can have the opposite problem of skipping over too much, trying to rush towards the end.
But,
Both
like,
are
I know I'm
fixable.
not ready for the end. So then my characters just have to start veering off, and then that's where things fall apart.
Yeah, that's why you should plan things. That your characters should have GPS coordinates
Tell
to
that
follow.
to George R. R. Martin.
I would, if I ever actually spoke to him.
I'm
Yeah,
pretty
I
sure
would.
he's been told that a lot.
Don't lie,
Or he
Alex.
should
You'd
just
be
edit.
like,
I mean,
hey,
you can
George.
do all sorts of things. I just think that, like, if you're gonna do that, you need to have a very sharp editing knife to cut things out, and he didn't.
I think he's a victim of success.
Yes, that is possible too.
Like, okay, so you've done really well so far, and we're too afraid to tell you when to stop something.
Yeah, the thing that happened to M. Night Shyamalan and George Lucas probably, and once you get too successful, people won't tell you no, and then all
I'll
of your
dispute the
mistakes will
George.
be published.
I'll dispute the George Lucas to an extent.
I don't know.
I think Lucas's
He had the right people around him when he started, and now that he doesn't have those people anymore, the problems that he had to start are...
Well, I
And
think
those right
Lucas's
people were people
problem
who
is
told
he
him no.
stopped making movies. Not that he stopped making Star Wars movies. He just stopped making movies. He stopped growing as a film creator.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This isn't Star Wars podcast.
not yet.
No, not yet.
It is Dresden podcast, though.
Apparently. Okay. So, when you are trying to sit down and actually write, however you do it, what kind of preparations do you do for that? Like, music, or do you have to be in a specific room? Do you have a ritual? Do you eschew all rituals for it? Do you have a special shirt to wear?
Actually, I have a lot to say because I actually used to have a very specific ritual, but now I've tried to pull away from that. So I used to do a lot of writing handwritten, um, because I didn't have a computer or whatever. But handwritten at in the cafeteria at work. And, when I was doing that, it would actually throw me off if someone ate at my table. Because I would always,
Fuck off, I'm busy.
well, I would always go down at a specific time, and this one specific table in the back corner that was like 280 degrees, wrapped by windows, like was always open. But if that table wasn't open, it would mess me up. So it was like, you know what? You can't do this. So I try to think about what I'm going to write for at least 24 hours before I write it. Like I want my subconscious to be able to marinate on it until I actually start writing.
Interesting. And now you just do it anywhere you want.
Pretty much.
Are you using word processors?
Yeah, just generally Word. Because I work on a lot of different mediums. Sometimes I'm literally writing on my phone. Sometimes I'm doing other things. So I use Word, the Word Online cloud thing.
Google Docs.
Google Docs is another one, but so I want to be able to do what I want when I want to do it. So I really wish I had tools available to me, like Scrivener or whatever, but I don't have those, and I'll probably never be able to have those until I, sell a few books and start doing this full time, which will never happen. Thank you, TJ from Jellyfish. Ever happen.
So, I mean, there are benefits to having a ritual. Like if, for example, you have an office in like whatever place, it's a dedicated space for writing. You sit down, you basically fire up all whatever modes you need to, and you just go. And you have like this thing that you program yourself, condition yourself to go, this is when I write and this is when everything's going to be productive.
Right.
But if that ritual is disrupted, like a cat walks into your office or something and then everyth's thrown off, then you can't be productive.
Yeah.
So there's good and bads on it.
Yeah, I mean, the ritual is great. I love the ritual. I am all about it. I love it. I mean, it's so much fun to just like, because it gets you in the perfect headspace. You're like, okay, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, then I have X amount of time to just focus. And you put on your headphones, listen to whatever music you want to, and start just writing up a tear. Just, you do like 2,000 words in an hour. And you're just like, yeah, this is great. But you just, unless you have a very just super stable workplace, you can't bank on the ritual.
Yeah.
If you're trying to write at work.
When your boss can run in, it's like, why haven't you done this thing for that meeting? How dare you?
Yeah, not everyone has Sanderson's old job of, nighttime hotel.
Right. Well, that's the same thing with, like, Ernest Klein. He was, like, late night IT, and all he had to make sure was the servers didn't go down. So he was there for, like, 8 hours with nothing to do for weeks on end. Yeah, and so... I've got a real job. I'm an industrial engineer for a Fortune 500 company. So, and I have a wife and all that other stuff. So my writing time is very limited. So
I used in at work.
So what I actually used to be very ritualistic. But like I was saying earlier, like I had to learn to get away from that just because if I didn't, I couldn't write. And so if I went 2 weeks without writing, I just get like super pent up, or it's like being really like passive aggressive and weird. So like I had all this like stuff built up in here where I was just like lashing out at people.
I mean, if your lifestyle isn't conducive to you having something that's as delicate as a ritual, then you either work around it or you don't work. So unfortunately, it is just kind of that black and white. Either you do it or you don't. And you kind of have to get through it. But when you do get the time to sit down and write, or I don't know, maybe you're a weird person, you like to stand. But
I'm getting my standing desk.
Hemingway do that?
Yes, he did. But I'm getting my
Hemingway
standing
probably
desk
wrote
next
with
week.
his dick.
Just slapping all over the typewriters. Like,
It is Hemingway.
It's gotta hurt, doesn't it? Okay.
I found Ritual.
Okay, hold on. Are you listening music that has words in it?
Oh, yeah, but
See,
I guess I
because
could
if
throw
you
on some. No, I couldn't even throw on like Tchaikovsky or something. I get too excited.
It
Okay,
really
one thing-
depends on the scene for me. But I don't want to cut any. Like, I literally cut off for a second, so I'm trying to get back in the conversation, but I don't want to cut any conversation off.
Fine.
is Benadryl kicking in?
Yes. Okay, so I mean, words with music really doesn't do much to me in general, unless it's like rap, where it's more, spoken word kind of thing. But there are definitely certain musics I listen to at certain times for different moods. For happy moods, especially, I really like Bleachers, their first album. They have this one song, it's Like the River Runs, and just the beat of that song and the timbre of the words, it's just like, if you want to just be happy while writing, just listen to that song over and over again. You can punch out so many words.
Part for me is music in particular, for some weird reason, like tends to associate itself with things.
Yes.
So various songs will remind me of books, stories, games, whatnot. And if I listen to music, the idea of the story I'm writing in my head starts to get messed up.
Which could be a benefit if you're wanting to emulate something, but otherwise, I don't know. So, I mean, if you're trying to work with words and you are listening to something with words, it can distract you and interrupt you. And so if you go towards something that doesn't have words or lyrics, then it might be like just like a cushion to whatever else is happening around you. Like, I'm weird, but I can't stand listening to the sound of my own typing.
Piano, so I sometimes get distracted of listening to something and thinking about playing it.
But what ends up happening is you start remembering you wrote this really great sentence while listening to this music. So you might start. I've definitely fallen into it myself, where like, I did really great listening to this one music, and my writing suffered because I was starting to emulate what I was listening to in my writing, even though they're two completely different stories.
I mean, it can be really helpful because it's like mood music, so that you can like emulate whatever mood that music puts you in to try to force that onto your characters, or just like keep you upbeat and going, or distracted from, like, I don't know, you have a crying baby in the background and you don't want to listen to it, listen to something better, and that'll help you, and things like that. But if you, I don't know, I find like lyrics can be very distracting.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of my writing, I try not to write under any influence. So I try not to drink too much. If I'm going to write a lot, I'm just kind of myself. That's the best way I can actually write.
Writing is a lot of work. I mean, like, it's just like having to constantly think of a new, like, describe whatever else is happening and going on. It's constant work. So I won't take anything that puts me to sleep. For example, alcohol might have a threat to do that. I just drink a ton of caffeine instead.
But like you make you jittery.
I don't know that I don't get jittery anymore. I drink a lot of coffee. I like coffee. I can be like perfectly situated and comfortable and ready to go for like 4 hours straight, but I'll keep getting up to get more coffee.
Yeah, and part of that is just learning how to write. Like everyone thinks that like everything's you perfect or whatever, but part of it is just putting your fingers to the keys or to, you know, pen to paper or whatever. And I think that's more important than anything else. Just what do you need to do to get you to actually write, you know?
And a lot of it, I think, is, especially for new people, is dealing with the fact that you have to actually start. It's like an empty blank page is intimidating.
Right.
And you have to start somewhere. So if you have, like, you start in the middle of the story or something, and as long as you get, like, some paragraphs on there, you can keep working with it, but you need to do that first bit of a hurdle, and then you have something to build off of.
I wish Colin was here right now, but you can't see
Yeah.
that. Well, if you're watching on the YouTube, you can, but if not. Do you do any mental exercises to, like, help your writing?
I don't know anymore. Because I could be, and I'm, like, not even noticing that they are, because, like, a lot of the times, kind of like what you said, of, like, trying to think of it beforehand, it's like the more clear it is in my head, then the easier it is for me to get down and write it. So that's one of the things that I outline so much, is because then I know what I'm doing, even if I'm tired. But like if like I'm trying to fall asleep and I'm in that annoying stage of still being awake and I need to stop thinking, I'll just think about the stories and things will kind of flesh out somehow. Can't really describe it. It just does.
I mean, I'll admit one of my worst suits is description. I mean, that's something I don't do very well. So what I do is when I start hearing a noise, especially, I generally have a half-mile walk to work just because of where my work is. So when people are walking around me, I'll start writing the scene in my head just to flush out different ideas for her, you know, the way a person's boot sounds, or, you know, especially when the snow is there, like how a boot sounds under snow versus a tennis shoe versus other things. Like there's so much I try to do when I'm not actually writing to actually help my writing.
Yeah, I actually remember I used to do that a few years ago, and I don't know why I might have stopped, but like if I was bored or just waiting for something to happen and I'm just watching other things happening around me, how would I describe it and trying to get the prose better? So it's not like actually writing in terms of trying to get better with it, but it's kind of practicing it in your head, and you'd still probably see improvements over time.
Right, but it's also like I remember when before I got my current position in the building, I used to park into the other side of the building. I used to walk up to the building, you know, just because of how we got there, with a certain woman who had just these god awful boots, but they just sounded like fucking Clydesdales. And it's like, how many ways can you describe a fucking Clydesdale walking down a parking lot? And I found like 7 or 8 different ways to describe this. The thunderous hoof, the mighty hoof. I mean, there's so many different ways you can do it.
Interesting. But Colin, do you do any like sort of mental exercises in order to just help out?
No, I should.
Okay.
God damn it, do better.
I mean,
this is a fucking podcast, man.
Yeah, we have really high standards of quality required here.
At times, like, I'll just sit back and observe the world, and more for content than prose. Like, see how people react to things and whatnot.
I mean, that's
like,
kind of always been kind of my issue, is just the prose. I can always see see the story in my head, but I can never write it down.
Yeah, it's weird how much this prose heavy avenue is so much based on vivid imagery. But when I'm trying to actually sit down and write it, I want to get the prose in place that I can accept it and move on. Like if there's a bad couple of sentences and it takes me a while to figure out what's wrong with it, I won't be able to move on with it. But sometimes, like if I'm writing a conversation and nothing of it just seems right, I'll have to stop and figure out what's going on. A lot of time I have to take out something I've done and then keep going again. And that's just so that I can like let it be, but not trying to make it perfect, because there has to be times that you just let it suck, because otherwise you'll never get anywhere.
Yeah. Oh. You definitely need to be able to put your inner editor in the back room for a long time. That's really what Nano's all about. What is the, like, I forget the exact tagline, but it's like, don't get it good, just get it done.
Yeah, you don't, good isn't here yet. Good is
like first drafts suck. They always will. No one writes their perfect novel on draft one.
I mean, I've heard some people that like, maybe after they get to a point of being really good, they're able to just spit out a first draft and then be done. But a lot of it is that you're going to have weird pacing issues. You're definitely going to have typos.
Go listen to TJ, because
Yes.
he'll tell you there's a lot of work. Editors exist for a reason.
Yeah. And
They're going to take a scalpel to your story and tell you what's wrong with it, because there's going to be something wrong with it.
and it's going to be better afterwards, because they're going to take out the bad parts, and then all that remains is the good parts.
Yeah, you're writing a story that's near and dear to your heart, but the editor is going to see what the reader sees.
Yes.
And he's gonna take
That is
out
important, because you're only going to see what you are intending to put into it, but everyone else is going to get what you actually put into it. So beta readers are going to say, what the hell happened in this paragraph? I don't understand. And you say, but isn't it perfectly obvious that like this person was saying that thing to the other person and political things and blah, 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 world's ending, blah, blah. And it's like the beta readers are going to like, no, this doesn't make sense and you have to fix it.
No one ever told that to Stephen Erickson.
They
He wrote
should
an entire
have.
series based on that.
Everyone needs no people. Everyone needs someone's like, this didn't make sense, and you have to fix it.
Or even sometimes they might come back to you and say, hey, so I know you were trying to hint at this thing, but you kind of beat me over the head with it. Can you cut out part of that?
Yes, there's always things like that.
Yeah, that's definitely my problem when it comes to things. Like, I'm thinking I'm making these sly hints at things, and it's like, the reader catches on a lot earlier than I expect them to, and I wrote 3 more sentences than I needed to get the point across.
Yeah, it's something I'm usually frustrated about in anything I consume. It's like, I'm not that clever of a person, but if a surprise is supposed to be like a twist, make it actually surprising and not telegraphed.
Yeah, and I definitely noticed during this last story that I was reusing ways of describing things too often.
Oh,
like
like
it's-
a same tagline, essentially?
Like the same descriptive words.
It was brown
It's
and
like-
beautiful.
This isn't Dresden. Everyone's not beautiful.
Have you read Ellie Modesitt?
No.
Okay, well,
Is he,
he does sci-fi because he's in like similar league as Sanderson in terms of being very prolific, and I'm pretty sure he also lives in Utah, so take that for what you will. But he's written like 30 something plus books, and he just like gets really focused on one word once in a while. And there was one of them, it was kind of a standalone sci-fi thing, and he used the word nihilin like 10, 20 times a page, and it means black, like dark black kind of night. And he abused the fuck out of it. And then in a completely different story, series, world, universe, he had the main character named Nylon that had white hair. It's like, okay, I get it. You like that word.
in Deadhouse Gates, the second Malazan book takes place on like the desert continent, and red is a very prominent color there, like their scarves and whatnot, and they use a lot of red paint and stuff. But he uses the word ochre for like rust brown, I should say more. And it's like, everything starts becoming ochre for the entire book. It's just, he uses that word constantly in the story. And it's obvious.
When everything is one color, you stop seeing that color. You ever put on colored glasses, and then you pull it off and everything is the opposite color?
To be fair, it's a desert continent. There really isn't much color.
Okay, but they're going to start finding a lot of differences in that shade of ochre versus the other shade of ochre, so that one has a little bit different.
Yeah,
They're
come to
gonna
the
have
plains,
Yeah,
my
like-
friend.
Hmm?
Come to the plains. I'll show you different colors of desert.
Yeah, when it's the only color, the shades start mattering more.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and then, I mean, I don't know how far you've gotten into Lovecraft, but he loves his non-Euclidean geometry and his Cyclopean stuff.
I haven't gotten very far. I'm still working
He
on it.
reuses some of those phrases quite a bit.
One thing I'm noticing that I feel like a lot of people suffer from is the characters all feel like the same one. The point of view characters is always the same. It's just very interchangeable.
It's always the horrified male narrator,
That's always the same age as Lovecraft was at the time of writing
pretty much.
Yeah.
Always the middle-aged white male.
It's like one thing
There's
that
always-
you can do before you start writing is make sure that your characters feel like people.
Yeah.
How do you do
'Cause
that?
all of his narrators are always, like, they always somewhat, for a lot of the short stories, not when it comes to, like, at the Mountains of Madness or Dream Quest of Unknown Kadith, but, like, they often feel outside of the story.
Yeah.
Like, I'm thinking, like, Pickman's Gallery and stuff. It's just the narrator finding it eventually. They're never actually part of it.
I will actually say that the one that trumps that is The Tomb, which I think is the first one he ever published.
Which one? The Tomb?
It's a guy going crazy.
Oh, right. He does do,
But-
he finds ways of making the narration feel like it's falling to pieces.
He did a very good job with it. I don't think
Yeah.
it's connected to any of the other stuff that he was doing, but it was one person going crazy, and you could tell.
Is it because he gets stuck inside the tomb or something?
No, he wanted to be in the tomb. He thought he was going down and like spending nights there and everything. Everyone else saw that he's just like sitting in front of it, staring at it, and is hallucinating the entire thing. And then he gets locked up, and people break into it, and they say, "Oh, his name is written on this one empty casket, and he's been promised that he will be buried there." It's creepy. It was great.
Yeah, he's good at that.
Okay, this is also not a Lovecraft podcast. I'm so sorry for that tangent.
Do y'all ever
okay.
listen to Welcome to Night Vale? Welcome to Night Vale?
No.
It's a podcast about the town where everything that Lovecraft talks about happens. And it's sort of this, NPR style radio show about what happens at this town where all these terrible things are happening. It's hilarious and really good.
I did finally start watching Stranger Things.
Just now.
That's well worth it. I know.
There's a door, Colin. Like, the podcast listeners cannot see you, but like, get the fuck out, man.
I'm done
We
with the
are
first
no
season.
longer friends.
I'm going to forcibly pull us back to the topic of how do you sit down and write? Colin, do you drink wine while writing?
No, usually not.
Is it because of
Usually,
any particular reason?
Because typically I write between the hours of 1 and 5.
Okay.
Which usually means I'm getting home at 4 and cramming out as much writing as I can do.
So if you were typically writing between the hours of 8 and 10, would you have done it with wine?
It was the weekend. Not the week.
Okay. So when you've actually gotten everything in order and you sit down, do you have any tips on how to start on the front page? Because I mentioned it earlier, but blank pages are terrifying and intimidating. And how do you actually start? One thing that works for me is I know intricately what the opening scene will be. Whether it'll stay as the opening scene, I don't know, but I don't have to question what it's going to be. And that helps.
That's been a big part of Carlin's problem. I can't find out where to start the story.
That's because you started it everywhere already.
I know. and I don't. None of them work. None of them make me happy.
That might be a good thing. You know what? You might be reaching that state of, like, forever being unhappy with your own work.
Which is better than thinking everything I write is pure gold.
Yeah, it's totally better. But, yes, for the blank page 1, do you guys have any
tips? If I don't know the first paragraph, I won't write it. I mean, that's probably my biggest attribute and hindrance is if I don't know word 1, I won't do it.
So, I forget it.
Like the first 2,000 or 3,000 words are super easy. Everything else, not so much.
Yeah, definitely. But
I forget who said it. It might have been Sanderson in one of his lectures. But a lot of people have the problem where they start their story before the rising action.
That is also true.
And you should be starting here where things start happening, not here while someone's waiting for things to happen.
Yeah, starting when someone is waiting is generally probably not advised because you need something excited, you need something hooked. So if your opening paragraph is about something exciting, it'll probably excite the author and the reader and everything will just be a little bit easier. But you have to figure that out at some point.
Yeah. I just checked my...
If it helps you just start the writing process to start ahead of where you need it to be and then cut those words out later, that's also fine. Just cut the words later.
I just checked my Nano story, and about 700 words in, the main problem of the entire story is presented to the main character.
Nice.
Well, he's a cop in a city, and he's finishing up one case, and before he's even finished with that, someone brings him a new case.
Yay!
And there he goes. There's no point
going
waiting.
back on the War Dresden Files podcast, but I was standing next to a burning building, but it was not my fault. And that's a great opening line. It's so good. You just get right in that story.
He's missing that in the first novels.
Yes.
Actually,
he hasn't figured
I disagree. I disagree.
It takes a while for some of the plots to develop in the first 5 books.
I think.
Well, I mean,
Storm. I will take
Grave Peril out of that because that just kind of starts.
Yes, that's when he started figuring out you jump in the middle of it. I mean, even in Summer Night, he's jumping into there's toads raining.
Yeah, but
typically
still.
That's a bad sign. I feel like was that who did Hitchhiker's Guide?
Douglas Adams.
Yeah, was that at the beginning the universe was created. It was generally agreed that it was a bad idea.
Yeah.
he takes sometimes a little while though. If I look at where I was in Death Masks, I'm like 2/3 of the way through the story, and I feel like Harry's still trying to figure it out.
I've argued this before. Death Masks was not the best one.
Really?
It doesn't feel like
book, you bitch.
I mean, I love the Denarians and I love their introduction, but it doesn't feel like he's ever really
doing anything.
There's no hump there that he gets to. Yeah.
Are you missing the second act?
Kind of, yeah.
I think with Death Mask, it's like when he stops becoming a private eye and starts becoming just like a wizard.
Kind of that,
though. The problem is, I think that what he did is he kept it for a lot of it after is there's 2 storylines, and you can see this in Stormfront as well. There's 2 different cases that he's working on, and then they collide. But with Death Mask, they didn't collide as much, and they feel so disconnected that you kind of forget, oh yeah, that one happened in the same story as the other, which is what I think the issue is. It just
I'm on chapter 17, and it feels like Harry's still putting together the first pieces of the first thing we learn about.
Yeah.
He just found his second. That duel came about on, chapter 1. How have we gotten 17 chapters before you had to finally figure this out?
But, he also got his second... this is not here nor there for this podcast.
That's the first.
If
Someone
you
else
like
said that
the
part.
Dresden Files, please check out the Dresden Files on this same network.
But it does have to do with when you're writing a
Dresden.
story, you want to make sure that your action is consistent. There's an ebb and a flow to it, and your readers are satisfied.
Right,
Nothing
and
like
that's
that.
why, like, everyone I read says skip the first 3 books. And I'm
I
like,
wouldn't do
no,
that.
you can't do that. You have to start with Stormfront because it creates the character Dresden himself.
I loved Tor put out a list of the definitive author's order to reading Malazan, which started off with the prequel trilogy that I'm in the middle of that isn't even finished yet, that he just put on hold. But, like, none of those storylines in that book would be anywhere near as interesting if you hadn't already read 10 books about these characters and now you want to know about them.
Yeah,
And
you're
Erickson-
already invested at that
yeah.
point.
And you're curious. Because you know who they are in the future, not in the past. But Erickson came out and said, no, you should just read them in publication order. Because that makes sense. You need backstory in a lot of things. Dresden does, the first couple books do,
The first
are more
book is
characterization
amazing.
than anything. I like the first book.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I will fight anyone saying it's one of the worst Dresdens. I will literally fight them.
I only read it like a month ago and it's constant action.
Yeah.
It's a good story. It's also the one he was the worst at writing. Because
Okay, the writing is not great. And
Right.
This is a process episode.
But the story is so good, and it's like it's just so
he
boom,
hits-
boom, boom, boom. And I
And
love
yet he
the
got
no-
significantly better afterwards. So when you're comparing the series against itself, you can say, oh yeah,
But, like,
Changes was better than Stormfront.
Yes,
I know,
but
let's be honest. Most readers are not us when it comes to, like, the actual physical writing.
No, most
People
readers
just
are like Justin, who also agrees with me.
No, but
Okay, so
a
here's
good story
my
will
problem.
supersede bad writing or average writing.
So
And actually, but Butcher himself says the opposite. Like, the better the execution is the more important part than a bad story. You can have like a very simple story and execute it perfectly, and it will sell.
Yes,
Hence,
but I would-
Codex Alera.
Execution is different than writing.
right.
The wording in Stormfront is not up to caliber to the later books. But
Neither
the
is his pacing or his plotting.
I would say the plotting and the pacing are fine.
No, he was a lot whimsier at the time, flimsy, and the connections between the two cases that he has to work, and then they collide. They're
Okay, so
Well,
Harry's a bit of an idiot through the whole thing, not realizing these things are related.
in the terms of Dresden, what I miss in the later series is that he's not a detective anymore. And
But
that's
he's
what
still trying to
he
write it in a
wants to
case
be,
file
but-
setting.
But yeah, and that's the issue is he gives up the practice in like the 7th book, essentially.
I think he gave it up when it was blown up in
Changes?
his book. Yeah, it changes.
12?
Right, but
Yeah.
I mean
Also, when he died.
Lost his home.
the storyline diverges from him being this
Spoilers.
hard-boiled gumshoe, and I really
Yeah.
I miss
It was
that. I
fun.
like that.
I feel like we should give up on the high fantasy episode.
I think the biggest problem he has is that he still tries to make it a case files episode. Like, every book's still a case file, even though Harry's not an investigator anymore.
Well, I guess he still has very discrete issues that he has to deal with in very small amounts of time. Like, you get 3 days, essentially, of
Every book.
terrible.
Also, that's part of
Okay.
the charm and problem in Dresden Files is that every book is literally the 3 worst days of Harry's life.
Yeah.
Right,
And then
so-
you can kind of, like, they're discrete, and, okay, yeah, this one has a name, that one has a name, because, they had months between.
All right, so I'm going to ask a question because I can, and we're going to round out this episode. So, what's
while
the
ago.
one story that you started and left behind that you wish you could go back to?
Alex, your floating city?
Maybe. Like, I really like the flying city things. I don't know, I just like that. So I might take the basic idea, take the characters, and then completely undo everything else,
Give
including
us a
like,
setting.
magic
Come on.
systems. So what I had was a city that was flying, and then it like isolated itself from the rest of the planet, which caused problems. Like, food sources got a little hectic sometimes. And then a crazy person was trying to take over the city, and I have characters in the middle that are trying to stop it.
Always a crazy person.
Yeah, there's a crazy person. I had no idea how to make an antagonist for this, so I just, okay, he's crazy. Because I was really not good at that. And then, like, I have various stories, like, okay, I don't need to describe why the antagonist is bad, because they're monsters. So
Like, I
can run with that.
I find myself often, when I have stories, I know who the antagonist is and what they're doing.
Well,
But it's not until a lot of brainstorming and a lot of talking with Alex that I finally figure out why they're that way.
I mean,
Like, obviously political grab for power are constant, but what's making this person want that?
yeah, what does this person want to do with that power? Why are they trying to get to it?
Like, sure, everyone wants power, but what's driving this person to be this monstrous in his pursuit of power?
Yeah, so I had this person is trying to get power in order to do a crazy religious kill everyone in the city thing because God said so. And then I was going to, like, play with that, and my main characters are going to be trying to save the city, and also maybe I'm going to take control and do something I think we should do, for better or for worse.
Like, if you look at Zane in Mistborn 2,
yes,
he literally thinks, and he actually literally is seeing what he thinks is God.
Yeah, he, for very good reason, is crazy.
Also, like, I don't always give Sanderson a lot of credit for his twists, because I feel like
that was a good one.
That was a good one, but I feel like he kind of, puts the writing on the wall on page 1 and reminds you every 2 pages that this is going to happen. But I liked Spook, was it? In book 3?
Maybe
Spook?
Lester Burns?
Yeah, the kid who can't talk right.
Yeah, Lester Burns.
Like, the whole switch with him being also infected with ruin because of the metal.
I don't remember
blade.
that. Holy shit.
Like, he thinks he's seeing Kelsier constantly.
Oh, yeah, I do. Okay, yeah, that was in book 3 only. And
Yeah.
he was just having hallucinations of dead friend. I just really liked the twist of what his name meant.
Oh. But he pulls off that twist really well, and it helps that in book 2 he set up Zane to remind you of that fact. But that's where plotting and planning ahead can really help you. And pacing.
Yeah. And yes, and the plotting and the planning, and it's like, yeah, this is the hint that's going to go there, and this is important because of this, even if you can't understand it at the time, and blah, blah, blah.
It's cool when, like, a character like Zane exists, and you think, oh, wow, that was a really cool twist. But you don't realize that twist is actually setting itself up for a twist with another main character later on. Creating the scenario where it's plausible. So Zane had his issues, and you think that's cool and interesting in its own storyline, but it also set up Spook's whole story.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 different characters had their own stories, even though they're similar in method. The character stories are still separate and independent, and they work independently of each other to be good.
Also a compliment to narration style, because you only see Zane through Vin, and he comes off as crazy.
I mean, he was a point of view character as well, so
Did
you
he have
see him
his
through
own?
his...
Okay.
Yeah.
I forget. I haven't read the second one in a while.
Yeah, because
But
there
Spook
was, like,
gets his own...
things of his family that you think, oh, okay.
But Spook gets his own entire arc in a book, and you don't realize he's crazy at the time because you're in his head, and he doesn't think he's crazy. Zane knew he was crazy.
And this all became because we were talking about antagonists are hard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it helps when you can create reasons for things.
Yeah, reasons
Books
are
are
important.
books are better. Books are better when they have reasons.
And that will be
Yes.
our next episode. Antagonism and
I
reasons
think what we
to
should
hate
try to
people.
do is
Have
do
we
the
not done that
second
before?
part of this episode. Because before, when we did this, we had one complete coherent episode, beginning to end, of how to write. And this time we
Hold
had
on.
nothing but tangents.
I don't know about that one. We never have a complete coherent episode.
That one was, it was
So,
coherent,
Next
and we got to the editing part.
We'll actually address what to do in the middle, because we kind of just said how much we hated the middle, and
Yeah.
then moved on.
Yeah, actually,
What to do
that
in the
would be
middle.
a really good
Editing.
episode. The middle.
And maybe the end.
The ends are easy.
I don't know how often people actually get to the
Beginnings
end
are
because they
scary.
get stuck
The
in the middle.
ends are usually sad. In the middle is what you have to enjoy.
Okay, the next episode will be the middle, and if we make progress on it, the
If
end.
we're going to
too.
do the ends, then I'm going to have to just talk about Malazan for an hour straight, because his books can be 3/4 of... Okay, so I'm committed to this book. What's going on?
Yeah.
And then the end is like, holy shit. Things
All
get-
right. This episode of High Fantasy ended a really long time ago, but now we're going to stop recording soon.
If you listen to the things we're trying to say and put them all together, you'll get a coherent idea of how to help your writing.
But I can't promise any of it'll make sense unless
You
you've seen
can
all of the books
find
that we've
me
read.
at brokenjars.xyz. I'm on Twitter at Jacob Ingalls. You can find us at Broken Jars
.xyz.
right now. Patreon.com // Broken Jars. Sorry. Like I said, I told you earlier.
What's the Benadryl?
Attack of the Benadryl.
I'm on the cold med, so I'm doing my best right now.
Also, if someone wants to make a... We
Yeah,
did
did
it.
you want to do the fun thing now?
I was going to say, if someone wants to make a bingo for
Okay,
how
so
off-topic we get at times.
if
And
you
we'll
are
be talking
listening to this point
Also,
of this
Alex stabbed
episode,
people.
thank you, first off. But second, if you put a review on our Google page or our iTunes page for this podcast, you will be opening yourself up to being the recipient of a Scrivener license.
And if you don't know what Scrivener is, it is a writing program.
We'll get to that when we start talking about sitting down and writing again in the middle.
Look up Scrivener. It is entirely worth the money. I have nothing but positives to say about that program.
Yeah. So random person chosen if they do
Yes.
a review for
So
us
give-
on Google or iTunes, and they will get Scrivener.
Yes. It's a $4
Also, Alex
value.
stabs
All you
people.
gotta do is listen to this podcast and put something up, and you might win this great prize. Woo!
It's really good.
It is.
I swear.
I started using it. Let's see. My first Nano, which is when I really got serious about writing, was 5 years ago. I used Google Docs, and I realized that
It sucks.
once you hit 50,000 words, Google Docs can't load anymore. And then after winning that, there was a 50% off Scrivener, and I'm like, okay, I'll try it. Bought it, and I can't use anything else.
Yeah.
You can literally all your ideas, all your characters, all your settings, concepts can all go into one file that is just there, and you can quickly bounce between split screen. It's amazing.
Yeah. Split screening is great. Take a note, Blue Jeans. All right.
All right, guys. Thank you for coming out. This has been High Fantasy. Bye. This is Jacob. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.